I toasted my retirement with champagne. Minutes later, I felt the poison in my body. Their words echoed, "It's for your own good." What nobody imagined was that I'd already set up my own defense. But to understand how I got here, let me tell you how it all started. You know that feeling when you've worked your entire life for a moment, and when it finally arrives, it feels like a dream. That's exactly what I felt that September night at my home in Charleston, South Carolina. You know that feeling when you've worked your entire life for a moment, and when it finally arrives, it feels like a dream. That's exactly what I felt that September night at my home in Charleston, South Carolina. After decades as a university professor, I was retiring, and not just any way, but with an elegant party, full of people I loved, flowers everywhere, and French champagne I'd been saving for years. The house was impeccable. Soft lights illuminated the garden, and I felt complete, almost whole. But there's something about life I've learned over time. When everything seems too perfect, it's because something's about to fall apart. And that night, my real story of total humiliation was just beginning, though I didn't know it yet. John, my son, arrived early with his wife, Adriana Lopez Walker, Brazilian name changed to Adriana Lopez Walker, kept similar to maintain the character's background. A woman who'd always treated me with such cold politeness it was freezing. They came through the front door carrying an expensive bottle of wine, the kind of gift that seems generous, but was chosen just to impress others. Adriana looked impeccable, as always, with that magazine smile that never reached her eyes. John hugged me, but the hug was quick, mechanical, like someone fulfilling protocol. I tried to ignore the strange sensation that came over me, that pit in my stomach that had nothing to do with nervousness. After all, it was my party, my night, and I deserved to be happy. But something in the air was already wrong. Guests started arriving, neighbors, university colleagues, some longtime friends who'd watched my career grow. The house filled with voices, laughter, old stories being retold with affection. Deep down, I knew that moment was mine. Decades of dedication, sleepless nights, grading papers, lives I'd touched through education. But when my gaze crossed with Adriana's, I saw something different. She wasn't enjoying the party. She was observing. And it wasn't casual observation, it was calculated, as if she were studying my every move, every person who approached me. That gave me chills. When it was time for the toast, everyone gathered in the main room. My son picked up a champagne glass and raised it in the air, beginning a speech about how I was an incredible mother and an exemplary professional. The words were beautiful, but his voice was strange, kind of shaky, as if he were reading something memorized. I smiled, trying to absorb that moment that should have been perfect. Adriana was beside him, also with a glass in hand, but her face was tense, almost anxious. Then someone handed me my glass, that special crystal glass I'd set aside just for myself. I raised it in the air with everyone, and when Adriana's eyes met mine, for a split second, I saw something that chilled me inside. Fear, expectation. I'm not sure, but it was enough to make my heart race. I brought the glass to my lips, and took a generous sip of champagne. The taste was strange, slightly bitter, with a metallic touch that shouldn't have been there. But before I could think much about it, a wave of dizziness hit me like a runaway train. My hands started tingling, and the room around me seemed to spin in slow motion. I tried to lean on the table, but my legs were weak, trembling, as if they weren't mine anymore. The voices around me became muffled, distant, and I felt a knot in my stomach that had nothing to do with nausea. It was pure fear. My heart raced, beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. And then everything became blurry. Mom, are you okay?" John's voice sounded distant, but I could identify the tone of concern. Or was it guilt? I tried to respond, but my tongue was heavy, words wouldn't come out. I felt hands holding me, helping me sit on the sofa. Someone brought water. Another person opened the window to let air in. I closed my eyes, trying to regain control of my own breathing, and that's when I heard Adriana whisper something to John. "I told you she shouldn't mix medication with alcohol." The phrase sounded so rehearsed, so convenient, that even in my mental confusion, Part of me raised an alert signal. That didn't make sense. I hadn't taken any medication before the party. Gradually, the dizziness started to pass, but the discomfort remained. It wasn't just physical, it was a feeling that something was very, very wrong. I looked around and saw worried faces, but I also saw exchanged glances between John and Adriana, glances that seemed to carry a secret. Everyone attributed my discomfort to mixing medications with champagne, an explanation that sounded reasonable to outsiders. But I knew my own health, knew what I'd taken or not taken, and that explanation didn't stick. Something had been placed in that glass, and the way Adriana was acting, tense and vigilant, told me she knew exactly what it was. The elderly mother everyone saw as fragile was beginning to wake up to a brutal truth. The party continued, but with a heavy cloud over everything. People tried to resume the cheerful atmosphere, but I couldn't disconnect from that feeling. John stayed close to me the whole time, but his behavior was strange, distant, mechanical, as if he were playing a role. Adriana, on the other hand, seemed relieved, almost relaxed, as if the worst had already passed. And the more I observed, the more my suspicion grew. That hadn't been an accident. It hadn't been a random reaction from my body. Someone had done something, and that someone was inside my own house, pretending to care while watching me with calculating eyes. This was the emotional story I was about to live, though at that moment, I still didn't know how far the betrayal would go. When guests finally left and the house fell silent, I sat alone in the kitchen, looking at the crystal glass still on the table. My body still trembled slightly, but my mind was clearer than ever. I wasn't a woman who ignored signs. I'd spent my life teaching young people to think critically, to question, not to accept things at face value. And now, I was applying all of that to my own life. John and Adriana had left quickly after the party, claiming they had commitments the next day. But their hurry, the way they avoided my gaze when saying goodbye, all of it confirmed what my instinct was already screaming. I'd been the target of something. And the question that wouldn't stop was, why? What would an ungrateful son and a gold-digger daughter-in-law gain from this? I lay down that night, unable to sleep, staring at the ceiling and reviewing every detail of the party. The glass that was handed to me, Adriana's look, John's reaction, the comment about medications I hadn't taken. Everything seemed meticulously planned, as if I were in a theater play and didn't know my role. But there's one thing they underestimated about me. I wasn't just a retired elderly mother. I was a woman who'd faced decades of challenges, who'd built a solid career in a world that wasn't always kind to women of my generation. And if anyone thought I'd let myself be manipulated or destroyed without fighting, they were very, very wrong. That night was the beginning of everything, the beginning of my silent war, my investigation, my calculated revenge. And they had no idea what was coming. You know when you feel something's changed, but nobody around you admits it. That was exactly it. John started calling me every day, something he hadn't done in months, always with that exaggerated tone of concern that sounded faker than a $3 bill. Mom, how are you feeling? Still dizzy? Did you take your meds properly? The questions came in sequence, mechanical, as if he were reading from a script. And Adriana, well, she started showing up at my house unannounced, always with a ready excuse, bringing homemade soup, offering help organizing the house, suggesting I rest more. At first, I tried to believe it was genuine, but each gesture came accompanied by a calculating look, a casual phrase that seemed innocent but carried invisible weight. It was on a Thursday afternoon that the bomb really started being armed. John and Adriana came together, sat with me in the living room, and, with carefully rehearsed smiles, began the conversation. Mom, we've been thinking a lot about you, John said, leaning forward with that posture of someone about to deliver serious news. After what happened at the party, we're really worried about your safety here, alone in this big house. Adriana completed, with that soft, venomous voice. What if you fall? What if you have another crisis and there's nobody around to help? I listened in silence, feeling each word like a needle being slowly inserted. They were planting fear, and doing it with frightening mastery. Then came the suggestion, disguised of course, as if it were the most natural and loving thing in the world. We found an incredible place, Mom. It's called Oak Ridge Senior Living. It's a luxury nursing home on the outskirts of Charleston. It has 24-hour medical care, social activities, everything you deserve. John spoke as if he were offering me a vacation at a 5-star resort. But I'm not foolish. I know my son, and I knew that behind that facade of concern was something much darker. Adriana pulled out her phone and started showing me pictures of the place. Spacious rooms, well-kept gardens, living room with fireplace, everything beautiful, everything perfect, everything absolutely too convenient for someone who wanted to get me out of the way. It's not like it's urgent, Mom, John continued, but his tone said otherwise. But we think it'd be good for you to at least visit the place. Get to know it. Maybe even make a reservation. You know, spots are in high demand. Reservation. The word echoed in my head like an alarm bell. They weren't just suggesting, they were pushing. And the more I tried to change the subject, the more they insisted, always with that smile of someone doing a favor. It's for your safety, Mom. It's for your own good. That phrase, those damned words I'd hear repeated over the next few days, as if putting an elderly mother in a nursing home was an act of love, not convenience. As if I were incapable of deciding about my own life. But the worst was yet to come. A few days later, John showed up alone, this time with a folder of documents under his arm. He sat at the kitchen table with me and opened the folder with a heavy sigh, as if he were about to discuss something extremely important. Mom, I need you to sign this here. It's a power of attorney. Nothing major, just to make bureaucratic things easier. He slid the papers in my direction with an already uncapped pen, as if he expected me to sign without even reading. I picked up the documents, glanced through pages full of legal jargon, and felt a chill down my spine. This wasn't just to make things easier. This was total control. It was power over my finances, my medical decisions, my entire life. Why do you need this, John? I asked, looking directly into his eyes. He looked away. First sign he was lying. It's just a precaution, Mom. In case something happens to you, I can take care of your accounts, pay bills, those things. It's my responsibility as your son. Responsibility. What a beautiful word to disguise greed. I pushed the papers back in his direction and said I needed to think. His reaction was instant. Poorly disguised irritation, tension in his shoulders, heavier breathing. Mom, there's not much to think about. It's simple, just sign. But I didn't sign. And for the first time, I saw something on my son's face that truly scared me. Impatience, desperation, as if he needed that urgently. The visits continued, always with the same litany. The wonderful nursing home, the necessary power of attorney, the risks of me living alone. Adriana came back, this time bringing brochures from Oak Ridge Senior Living, highlighting with a pink pen all the advantages of living there. Eleanor, you deserve to rest, deserve to be cared for. Why insist on staying alone in this huge house? She spoke as if my independence were a burden, as if my ability to care for myself were an illusion. And worse, she started to insinuate, subtly but clearly, that I was becoming forgetful, confused, fragile. Do you remember if you took your meds this morning? Because yesterday you didn't remember? ... Double quotes lies, pure lies, but said with such conviction that even I started doubting myself for a second. That's when something inside me awakened. It wasn't anger, it was clarity. I was being manipulated. My own son, the boy I'd carried in my arms, whom I'd taught to walk, was trying to push me into a corner, make me sign my life over to him. And Adriana, that gold-digger daughter-in-law who'd never shown a drop of genuine affection, was orchestrating everything with the coldness of someone who'd done this before. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about what I had. My house, my savings, my estate built with decades of hard work. And suddenly, everything made sense. The discomfort at the party, the insistence on the nursing home, the pressure for the power of attorney. This wasn't care, it was a plan. And I was right at the center of it. I sat alone on the porch that night, looking at the garden I'd planted myself over the years. The flowers swayed gently with the breeze, And I remembered all the times John played there as a child, all the family barbecues, all the laughter that echoed through that space. How did we get here? How does an ungrateful son decide his own mother is disposable? I couldn't find an answer that didn't break my heart. But one thing I knew with absolute certainty: I wasn't going to let them destroy me. I wasn't going to sign that power of attorney. I wasn't going to that nursing home. And, more importantly, I was going to find out exactly what they were plotting. Because if there's one thing I learned in life, it's that when you underestimate an intelligent woman, you've already lost the game. The next morning, I made the decision that would change everything. I picked up the phone, took a deep breath, and started making calls. I wasn't going to wait anymore to see what they'd do next. I wasn't going to be passive anymore. If they wanted to play dirty, I'd play smarter. And when everything came to light, and it would, they'd discover that messing with an elderly mother doesn't mean messing with someone weak. It means messing with someone who has decades of experience, wisdom, and above all, absolutely nothing to lose. The total humiliation they planned for me was about to turn against them, and I could hardly wait to see their faces when they realized they'd been caught in their own trap. The first call I made was to an old friend from the university, Margaret, who'd retired a few years before me. She'd gone through something similar with her own sister, a situation of financial manipulation that almost destroyed the family. She's the one who gave me the name, Gwen Ramirez, private investigator. Eleanor, if you suspect something, don't wait. These things only get worse with time, were her words. I wrote down the number with trembling hands, not from fear, but determination. I called right away, and the voice on the other end was firm, professional, exactly what I needed to hear. We scheduled a discreet meeting at a cafe downtown in Charleston, far from any place where John or Adriana could see me. I wasn't being paranoid, I was being strategic. Gwen was a woman in her early 40s, brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, attentive eyes that seemed to absorb every detail around her. She ordered black coffee, I ordered tea, and for almost 2 hours I told her everything. The party, the sudden discomfort, the insistent visits, the pressure for the nursing home, the power of attorney, the subtle comments about my supposed fragility. Gwen wrote everything down in a small notebook, asking pointed questions that showed she was really paying attention. Eleanor, you did well to reach out to me. This has all the characteristics of a planned family scam. And if it's what I think it is, we need to act fast. Those words, while they scared me, also brought a strange relief. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't making things up. Something was really happening. But Gwen wasn't alone in my strategy. She recommended a lawyer, Andrew Mitchell, specialized in elder law and financial abuse cases. You're going to need legal protection, Eleanor. If they try to declare you incapacitated or force any signature, you need to be shielded. That same week, I sat in Andrew's elegant office, a man around 60, with gray hair and a posture that conveyed authority. He listened to my story with a seriousness that made me realize the gravity of the situation. Mrs. Walker, what you're describing is attempted coercion and possibly fraud. We'll review all your documents, protect your assets, and investigate any suspicious movements related to your name. For the first time in weeks, I felt I had real allies. Gwen started the investigation immediately. She had methods I didn't even know existed, tracking public records, analyzing financial transactions, even discreet surveillance when necessary. In less than a week, she came back with information that made my stomach churn. Eleanor, your son is drowning in debt. I'm talking about over $200,000 between personal loans, credit cards, and business debts. The restaurant he manages is on the verge of bankruptcy, with lawsuits from suppliers and unpaid employees. I stayed silent, absorbing every word. John never told me any of this, never asked for help. He simply decided my money was the solution, and that I didn't need to agree with it. But the investigation into Adriana was even more shocking. Gwen handed me a folder with documents that seemed straight out of a suspense movie. Adriana Lopez Walker has a history. Before marrying your son, she was involved in 2 cases of document forgery. One was dismissed for lack of evidence. The other resulted in a judicial settlement, She was also investigated for family manipulation with previous in-laws, from a marriage that lasted only 3 years. And there's more. She was the beneficiary of a suspicious life insurance policy after an uncle's death, a case that was never fully resolved. My blood ran cold. I wasn't just dealing with greed, I was dealing with someone dangerous, calculating, someone who'd done this before. And my ungrateful son had married her. Gwen kept turning over every stone. That's when she found something that completely changed the course of the investigation. The name of a doctor, Dr. Salazar, a psychiatrist I'd never heard of in my life. Eleanor, this doctor issued 2 reports about your mental evaluations, reports you never authorized and probably don't even know exist. The documents suggest cognitive decline, severe forgetfulness, inability to make decisions, all based on family reports, without ever consulting you personally. My mouth went dry. They were building a case against me. They were creating a narrative that I was an incapable, confused elderly mother who needed to be placed under guardianship. And this wasn't just to push me into the nursing home, it was to take legal control of my life. Andrew acted quickly. He requested official copies of those reports and discovered that Dr. Salazar had received direct payments from Adriana Payments, registered as family consultations. This is medical fraud, Eleanor, and it can be used as proof of conspiracy. They were mounting a case to declare you incapacitated, probably to get legal guardianship and assume total control of your assets. He paused, looking directly into my eyes. But now that we know this, we can get ahead of them. We'll have you undergo a complete, independent medical evaluation, prove your full mental capacity, and document everything. They won't be able to take anything from you. The real story I was living was darker than I could have imagined, but it was also becoming clearer. While Gwen and Andrew worked, I maintained the facade at home. I kept answering John's calls, listening to Adriana's suggestions, pretending to consider the Oak Ridge senior living. But inside, I was at war. Every fake smile I returned was strategy. Every I'll think about it was a calculated move. They thought I was being convinced, little by little, that the pressure was working. But the truth is, I was buying time. Time for Gwen to discover more. Time for Andrew to shield my assets. Time to set up my own trap. And with each passing day, I discovered more about the depth of the betrayal. It wasn't just greed. It was a meticulous plan, coldly executed, to completely destroy me. One afternoon, Gwen called me urgently. Eleanor, I need to show you something in person. It's serious. We met at the same cafe, and she opened her laptop at our table, showing a series of emails she'd managed to access legally, through public records and open information. They were messages between Adriana and a lawyer specializing in elder guardianships. She was consulting about the necessary steps to assume legal control of someone with proven cognitive decline. The dates of the messages coincided exactly with the period right after my retirement party. They'd been planning this for months. Eleanor, the party was just the beginning. They wanted to destabilize you, create a public narrative that you were becoming fragile, and then use that to push you into the nursing home and take over everything. I closed my eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. The total humiliation they'd planned for me was all there, documented, undeniable. But there's something about discovering you're being betrayed by the people you love most. It hurts in a way no words can describe. That night, sitting alone in my living room, I looked at the family photos hanging on the wall. John as a child, John as a teenager, John graduating, John married. In each of them, I saw a piece of me, a piece of my love, my sacrifice. And now I saw a stranger, an ungrateful son who'd decided I was worth more dead or locked in a nursing home than alive and free. But if they thought I'd simply give up, accept my fate as a silent victim, they were very wrong. The emotional story unfolding wasn't about an elderly mother being deceived. It was about an intelligent woman fighting back, and the next chapter would be written by my own hands. It was on a Tuesday morning, while I was having my coffee in the kitchen, that I received the call from Andrew. His voice was different, deeper, more urgent. Eleanor, I need you to come to my office today. We've discovered something that completely changes the picture of this situation. My heart raced. In recent weeks, I'd already heard so many shocking revelations that I thought nothing else could surprise me. But from his tone, I knew I was wrong. I canceled my appointments for the day, put on simple clothes, and drove downtown with a knot in my stomach that wouldn't go away. When I entered his office, I saw Gwen was also there, sitting with a serious expression that confirmed my worst fears. Something very serious was about to be revealed. Andrew offered me water, waited for me to settle into the leather chair in front of his desk, and then opened a thick folder full of documents. "Eleanor, I'm going to be direct because you deserve to know the truth without beating around the bush. Adriana secretly took out a life insurance policy in your name. The value is $500,000. The words came out of his mouth, but my brain took a few seconds to process. $500,000. A life insurance policy. In my name, without my knowledge. I felt the blood drain from my face, and for a moment, the room seemed to spin around me. How is this possible? I never signed anything, never authorized this. My voice came out shaky, but loaded with anger that was starting to boil inside. Gwen leaned forward, placing a copy of the contract in front of me. "Eleanor, they used forged documents. Look here, this is your signature, but clearly forged. We compared it with your real signatures on other documents, and there are obvious differences. Adriana probably practiced your signature several times until she got something convincing enough. She also provided false medical information, claiming you'd authorized the policy as part of family planning. The insurance company didn't even question it, because the documents seemed legitimate at first glance. I looked at that signature. It was similar to mine, but at the same time it wasn't. It had small tremors, wrong angles, different pen pressure. It was an imitation, and a very well-done imitation, which meant she'd practiced, planned, prepared this for a long time. Who's the beneficiary? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Andrew turned the page and pointed to the name highlighted in yellow. John Walker and Adriana Lopez Walker, 50% each. In case of your death, they split the full amount. I felt a wave of nausea rise in my throat. My own son, the boy I'd given birth to, whom I'd raised, whom I'd loved unconditionally, was listed as the beneficiary of a fraudulent life insurance policy. This wasn't just greed, it was desire. Desire for me to die. Desire for me to disappear. And suddenly, that discomfort at the party took on a completely new meaning. They didn't just want to manipulate me or lock me in a nursing home. They wanted to kill me and earn $500,000 from it. How long ago was this policy taken out? My voice came out firmer now, fueled by anger. Gwen checked the documents. 6 months. It was done shortly after John started having serious financial problems with the restaurant. The dates match perfectly. As soon as the debts started piling up, Adriana began to act. First, the life insurance, then, getting closer to you, the more frequent visits, creating the narrative of fragility. Everything was meticulously planned, Eleanor. Every step was calculated. I closed my eyes, trying to control my breathing. The emotional story I was living had just transformed into a nightmare of unimaginable proportions. But at the same time, absolute clarity came over me. I wasn't dealing with confused or desperate people. I was dealing with criminals. And criminals need to be stopped. Andrew continued, his voice now loaded with professional indignation. What's even more serious, Eleanor, is that this policy was approved based on medical information that included the false reports from Dr. Salazar. They created a fraudulent medical history to justify the insurance, claiming you had health conditions you don't have, and they used that same history to start building the case for mental incapacity. It was a two-pronged plan. If they couldn't get you declared incapacitated and take over your assets legally, they had the insurance as plan B. And considering what happened at your retirement party, double quotes, he paused, leaving the words suspended in the air. But the meaning was crystal clear. They'd tried to kill me. That glass of champagne wasn't an accident. It was attempted murder. We need to go to the police, I said, my voice now firm as steel. But Andrew raised his hand, asking for calm. Not yet, Eleanor. If we go now, They can claim they didn't know anything, that it was all Adriana's idea, that John was deceived too. We need more solid evidence, evidence that directly links both of them to the plan. Gwen's working on it, and meanwhile, we're going to set up a strategy to protect you completely, and to catch them red-handed. I understood the logic, but every fiber of my being wanted immediate justice. I wanted to see their faces when they were confronted. I wanted them to know I'd discovered everything. But I also knew that hasty revenge is foolish, and I wasn't foolish. I was an underestimated elderly mother, and that would be their greatest weapon against themselves. Gwen grabbed her laptop and started showing me a complete timeline. Eleanor, look at how everything connects. 6 months ago, life insurance taken out. 5 months ago, first payments to Dr. Salazar. 4 months ago, Adriana starts visiting you more frequently, documenting episodes of confusion in messages to John. 3 months ago, John starts talking about the nursing home. 2 months ago, they visit Oak Ridge for the first time. 1 month ago, your retirement party, where you had the sudden discomfort. And in recent weeks, intense pressure for the power of attorney. All of this is a direct, planned path. There's no room for coincidence. Seeing everything laid out that way, chronologically, gave me a strange feeling. It was like watching my own destruction being architected, step by step, by people who should love me. The total humiliation they planned for me was all there. Documented, irrefutable. But you know what's most painful in all of this? It's not the money. It's not even the real danger I faced. It's the betrayal. It's looking back and realizing that every hug, every "I love you, Mom," every concerned call from recent months was fake. It was theater. It was pure manipulation. John, my ungrateful son, had looked at me and seen only dollar signs. And Adriana, that gold-digger daughter-in-law, had seen an opportunity. Together, they'd decided I was disposable, that my life was worth exactly $500,000, and that if they needed to accelerate my death to get that money, well, it was just a matter of planning. I sat there in that office, surrounded by evidence of my near destruction, and made a decision. They were going to pay. Every lie, every manipulation, every second of terror they made me feel. Everything would be collected, with interest. Andrew closed the folder and looked directly into my eyes. Eleanor, I know this is devastating, but I want you to know something. You're not alone. We have the legal tools, we have the evidence, and we're going to protect you completely. Now, we need to be strategic. We're going to make you seem like you're giving in to their pressure. We're going to make them believe they're winning. And when they take the next step, when they try to execute the power of attorney or take you to the nursing home, we're going to be ready. With the police. With everything. That made sense. Lure them into a trap. Make the hunter become the hunted. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something beyond fear and sadness. I felt power. Because now I knew exactly what they wanted. And I was going to give it to them on a silver platter. But what they'd receive in the end wouldn't be my life, my money, or my freedom. It would be handcuffs. And the real story of how an underestimated woman turned the tables would be told for decades. After that devastating meeting in Andrew's office, I spent the following days mentally preparing myself for what would come next. It wasn't easy to fake normalcy when you discover your own son wants you dead. But I had no choice. I needed to be convincing. So I started subtly changing my behavior. On John's calls, I began to seem more tired, more confused, repeating some things I'd already said. When Adriana came to visit, I'd forget where I'd put my car keys, or ask twice about the same subject. I was building the character they wanted to see, an elderly mother in decline, someone who was finally giving in. And it worked. I saw in their eyes that gleam of victory, that certainty the plan was working. They had no idea that every forgetfulness of mine was calculated. A week later, I called John. My voice was carefully modulated to sound resigned, almost defeated. John, son, I've been thinking a lot about what you guys said, about Oak Ridge, about the power of attorney, about everything. And you're right. I'm not as young anymore, and after that discomfort at the party, I've been feeling like maybe I need more help than I imagined. On the other end of the line, there was silence. Then his voice came loaded with poorly disguised relief. Mom, that's good to hear. We just want what's best for you, you know. We just want you to be safe and well cared for. Safe. What a bitter joke. But I swallowed my anger and continued. So let's do this. Let's schedule a meeting, and I'll sign that power of attorney. I want to resolve this soon and stop worrying about bureaucracy. The reaction was immediate. John almost stumbled over his words in his eagerness. Of course, Mom. How about tomorrow? Or even this afternoon? I can come over now with the documents. Adriana can come too, so we can talk about next steps. Maybe even schedule a visit to Oak Ridge. He was desperate to close this, and that told me everything I needed to know. They were in a hurry. Probably the debts were tightening, creditors knocking on the door. Every day that passed without access to my assets was one day closer to their total financial collapse. Tomorrow's better, John. Let's do this right. Calmly, you guys come here in the morning, bring the papers, and we'll resolve everything at once. I scheduled for 10 in the morning. And the moment I hung up the phone, I immediately called Andrew. The trap was set. Andrew and Gwen worked all night, preparing what would come next. They created a fake document, a power of attorney that looked completely legitimate, with all the seals, false witness signatures. Actors Andrew knew, everything perfect. But that document had no legal value whatsoever. It didn't give me power over anything, didn't transfer control of any assets. It was just paper printed with pretty words. Eleanor, when they come tomorrow, you sign this fake document in front of them. Act naturally, as if you're really giving in. And meanwhile, all your real assets are already protected in irrevocable trusts we created this week. They can't touch anything, even if they get the real power of attorney. Andrew showed me the real documents. My house, my accounts, my investments. Everything was now legally shielded. They could have that fake paper, but they wouldn't get a penny of mine. The next morning, I woke up early. I drank my coffee slowly, looking out the kitchen window. The sun was rising over Charleston, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. It was a beautiful day, too beautiful for what was about to happen. But it was also the day I'd finally turn the tables. I put on simple, comfortable clothes, and left my hair loose, purposely a bit messy to reinforce the image of fragility they expected. When I heard their car parking in front of the house, I took a deep breath. Showtime. I opened the door before they even rang the bell, forcing a tired smile. Hi kids. Come in, come in. Sorry about the house being a bit messy. I haven't had much energy lately. The perfect cue. I saw Adriana exchange a quick look with John, pure satisfaction. We sat in the living room, and John opened a folder he brought, removing a stack of organized papers. But before he could speak, I interrupted him. Before anything, I want you to know I understand. I understand you're worried about me, that you think I need help, and maybe you're right. Maybe I'm getting too old to take care of everything alone. Each word was a knife in my own pride, but necessary. John placed his hand over mine, in a gesture that would have been touching if I didn't know the truth. Mom, you're not old. You just need support, and we're here for that. Adriana completed, with that venomous smile. Eleanor, you've done so much for so many people throughout your life. Now it's time to let other people take care of you. It's fair. As if there were any fairness in what they were doing. John slid his documents in my direction, but I raised my hand. Actually, son, I already have the papers prepared. My lawyer helped me get everything organized to make it easier. I saw his expression change, surprise, followed by slight distrust. Your lawyer? You didn't tell me you'd consulted a lawyer. I forced a light laugh. Oh John, I may be old, but I still know important documents need legal guidance. Don't worry, everything's fine. Let me get them. I went to my office and grabbed the envelope Andrew had prepared. I came back and placed it on the table, opening and showing the fake document. John and Adriana leaned over the papers, reading each line with almost obsessive attention. I saw their eyes passing through the paragraphs, looking for traps, for loopholes. But the document was perfect, perfectly fake, but convincing. Everything's here, John said, his voice revealing relief. Control over bank accounts, medical decisions, property sales. Mom, This is going to make it so much easier for us to take care of you. Make it easier. What a beautiful euphemism for stealing. I picked up the pen he offered me, held it for a moment, letting the tension build, and then signed. My name flowed across the paper with decades of practice, firm and clear. It didn't tremble, didn't hesitate. And in that moment, as I signed my supposed surrender, I felt immense power. Because I knew what they didn't know, that was worthless. I pushed the document back to John, who immediately grabbed it as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. Adriana smiled, a genuine smile for the first time since I'd known her. They thought they'd won. Poor fools. So, Mom, now that this is resolved, we can start planning your move to Oak Ridge. How about we visit the place next week? Adriana's voice was light, almost cheerful, but I knew what would come after the move: isolation, total control, and eventually, well, the life insurance. I pretended to consider, putting my hand on my chin thoughtfully. Maybe, Adriana. But let me get used to this decision first, okay? It was a lot all at once. John quickly agreed, clearly trying not to pressure me too much now that he had what he wanted. Of course, Mom, no rush. You take your time. They stayed a few more minutes, talking about trivialities, but I saw their anxiety to leave, to run to a bank or notary, and start using that fake power of attorney. When they finally left, I closed the door and leaned against it, letting out a long sigh. Phase 1, complete. As soon as their car disappeared from the street, I picked up the phone and dialed. Andrew, they took the bait. I signed the fake document, and they left here convinced they have total control. On the other end, his voice came loaded with professional satisfaction. Perfect, Eleanor. Now we wait. Gwen's already keeping an eye on all their movements. The moment they try to access any of your accounts, use the power of attorney for any transaction, or make any movement related to the nursing home, we'll know. And so will the police. I hung up and sat on the sofa, looking at the room where, minutes before, my ungrateful son and my gold-digger daughter-in-law had silently celebrated what they thought was my defeat. But the emotional story unfolding had a twist they'd never see coming. And the next act? Well, that would be the most satisfying of all. Because finally, after months of manipulation and terror, I was no longer the victim. I was the hunter, and my prey was walking straight into the trap. The following days were tense waiting. Gwen had installed monitoring systems completely legal. Andrew assured that tracked any attempt by John or Adriana to use the fake power of attorney. And it didn't take long. 48 hours after signing, John tried to access my main bank account, presenting the document. The manager, already alerted by Andrew about the situation, pretended to process the request but immediately notified the authorities. Adriana, for her part, called Oak Ridge Senior Living, trying to reserve a permanent spot in my name, saying she had complete legal authorization to make decisions for me. Every move of theirs was being documented, recorded, filed. They were digging their own grave and didn't even notice. I, meanwhile, continued at home, living normally, waiting for the right moment. And that moment was coming. It was Andrew who called me on a Thursday afternoon with the news I'd been waiting for. Eleanor, the police are ready. We have enough evidence of attempted fraud, document forgery, and conspiracy. But there's more. The lab finally completed the analyses we requested. My heart raced. Weeks ago, at Andrew's request, I'd saved that champagne glass from the party, carefully wrapped in a plastic bag. It seemed like paranoia at the time, but Gwen insisted, if there was something in the drink, we need physical evidence. The private lab had taken time, but the results had just arrived. Eleanor, they found oleander extract in the glass. It's a deadly poison, derived from a plant common in gardens here in the South. In high doses, it causes exactly the symptoms you had: dizziness, tingling, mental confusion. And if you'd taken more than one sip, ... double quotes. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Are you sure about this? My voice came out in a whisper. Even suspecting, even knowing deep in my heart, hearing scientific confirmation was devastating. Andrew took a deep breath before responding. Absolute. And there's more. We got a court order for the hospital where Adriana was treated the night of the party to release her blood tests. Eleanor, she also had oleander in her system. Not as much as was in the glass, but enough to cause the symptoms that took her to the hospital. She claimed food poisoning at the time, remember? I remembered. I perfectly remembered Adriana leaving the party early, pale, saying she must have eaten something spoiled. And now it all made sense. Horrible, perfect sense. She'd drunk from the wrong glass. The glass that was meant for me. Gwen joined the call through a conference. Eleanor, when you felt the discomfort at the party and leaned on the table, do you remember switching glasses? I closed my eyes, going back to that moment. The dizziness, the confusion, my hands seeking support on the table where the glasses were arranged. I don't know. Everything was spinning. I leaned on the table, picked up my glass again to set it aside, but ... double quotes. Then I remembered, a flash of memory, 2 identical crystal glasses, side by side. I'd picked up one of them, but in my confused state, I wasn't sure if it was the same one I'd drunk from before. My God, I murmured. I picked up the wrong glass. And later, when things calmed down, someone must have picked up my original glass to drink from. Adriana. The real story gained contours of poetic justice. The gold digger daughter-in-law had taken the very poison she prepared for me. Exactly, Gwen confirmed. And that gives us not just attempted murder, but also a physical confession. Her body carries proof of the crime. The police are already preparing an arrest warrant. And for John too. As an accomplice, the text messages between them that we obtained through court order show he knew Adriana was planning to give you a serious scare. He may not have known about the poison specifically, but he knew something was going to happen at the party to make you vulnerable. My breathing became heavy. My son knew, maybe not the details, maybe not the exact method, but he knew his wife was going to hurt me, and he did nothing to stop it. Worse, he participated in the plan, pushed for the power of attorney, advanced the nursing home narrative. He was as guilty as she was. And the total humiliation they planned for me was about to turn against them spectacularly. Andrew continued, his voice now loaded with professional coldness that brought me comfort. Detective Anna Guzman from the Charleston Police Department will lead the operation. The plan is this: we're going to schedule a meeting here at my office with John and Adriana, using the excuse that we need to regularize some details of the power of attorney. They'll come thinking it's just final bureaucracy. But when they arrive, the police will be waiting. We want to catch both together, and we want to do this in a controlled environment. He paused. Eleanor, I know it'll be hard to see your son being arrested, but you need to be there. You need to confront them. You need them to know you discovered everything. He was right. It wasn't just about legal justice. It was about emotional justice. It was about looking into their eyes and showing that the elderly mother they underestimated was much stronger and smarter than they ever imagined. 2 days later, it was happening. John and Adriana received the call from Andrew asking them to come to his office to finalize some details of the power of attorney and discuss the next steps of estate planning. They readily accepted, too eager to finally have legal access to my money. I arrived at the office an hour early, accompanied by Gwen. Detective Anna Guzman was already there, a strong woman, around 40, with eyes that seemed to see through people. Mrs. Walker, she shook my hand firmly, we're going to get justice today. You can be sure of that. 2 other officers were discreetly positioned in adjacent rooms. Everything was prepared. I sat in a chair next to Andrew's desk, my hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from pure adrenaline. The emotional story was reaching its climax. When John and Adriana entered the office, their faces were confident, almost radiant. But seeing me sitting there, their expression changed. Confusion, surprise. Mom, what are you doing here? John asked, looking from me to Andrew. I thought this was just a technical meeting. Before Andrew could respond, Detective Guzman stood up from where she was, beside the bookshelf, revealing her presence. She showed her badge. John Walker and Adriana Lopez Walker. I'm Detective Anna Guzman from the Charleston Police Department. We need to talk. The blood drained from Adriana's face. John went pale, his eyes running around the room, as if looking for an exit. But there was no exit. Not this time. The other 2 officers entered, positioning themselves near the door. The circle was closed. "What's this about?" Adriana tried to keep her voice steady, but the tremor was noticeable. Detective Guzman opened a folder, removing documents and photos. "It's about attempted murder, fraud, document forgery, and conspiracy. You 2 are being investigated for an elaborate plan to assume control of Eleanor Walker's estate through illegal means." She placed a photo of the champagne glass on the table. "This glass was analyzed by a certified laboratory. It contains lethal levels of oleander extract, a poison that causes exactly the symptoms Mrs. Walker presented during her retirement party." Then she placed another page, the hospital medical report, and Adriana's blood, collected the night of the party, when she was admitted to the hospital, also contains oleander. "Mrs. Lopez Walker, you drank the poison you prepared for your mother-in-law, and that gave us all the evidence we needed." The silence that took over the room was deafening. Adriana looked at John, who looked at me. And in that moment, in my ungrateful son's eyes, I saw everything crumble: fear, desperation, and finally, for the first time, something that could be remorse. But it was too late. The detective continued. "We also have the attempts to use a fraudulent power of attorney, the illegal payments to Dr. Salazar to fabricate false medical reports, and messages between you 2 discussing the plan to commit Mrs. Walker to a nursing home against her will. Every move you made was documented. Every lie is recorded. And now, you're going to answer for all of it." She gestured to the other officers. "John Walker, Adriana Lopez Walker, you're under arrest." And as the handcuffs clicked on their wrists, I remained seated, quiet, watching the son I'd carried in my arms realize he'd completely underestimated the woman who gave him life. The emotional story was far from over. But this chapter, this one was closing exactly as I planned. The handcuffs on John and Adriana's wrists seemed unreal, as if I were watching a movie and not living this. But it was real. Everything was painfully real. John looked at me with wide eyes, starting to tremble. "Mom, I didn't know anything about this. You have to believe me. It was all her." He pointed at Adriana with his head, trying to deflect blame like he always did since childhood when he broke something at home. But it wasn't a broken vase anymore. It was my life. Adriana, on the other hand, remained silent. Her face transformed into a hard, cold mask. She knew she'd been caught. And unlike John, she was smart enough to know that denying at that moment would only make everything worse. But I still hadn't said a word. Still hadn't looked directly at them, because I knew that when I did, there'd be no going back. Detective Guzman turned to me. "Mrs. Walker, I know this is difficult, but we need your official statement. Can you tell us, from your own perspective, what happened at the party?" I took a deep breath, raised my eyes, and finally faced John. He seemed to shrink under my gaze. "I knew," I began, my voice surprisingly firm. "From the moment I took that sip of champagne and felt that strange taste, bitter, metallic, my body reacted immediately: dizziness, tingling, confusion. And when I looked around, I saw Adriana's look. It wasn't concern. It was expectation. She was waiting for me to fall, to faint, maybe worse." I paused, letting the words sink in. "But you know what saved me? My own confusion. When I leaned on the table, I picked up the wrong glass. I set mine aside and, without realizing it, drank from the other one. And later, when things calmed down, Adriana picked up my original glass. She drank her own poison." John tried to interrupt, but the detective raised her hand, telling him to be quiet. I continued. "After the party, they started the campaign. Frequent visits, comments about my supposed fragility, suggestions about the nursing home, pressure for the power of attorney, and I realized that night wasn't an accident. It was the beginning of a plan to get me out of the way, assume control of my assets, and eventually, my voice failed for a moment. Eventually kill me and collect the life insurance Adriana secretly took out in my name. $500,000. That was the price of my life in their eyes. Adriana closed her eyes, but her face remained impassive. John, on the other hand, was in total panic, shaking his head violently. No, Mom. I didn't know about the insurance. I didn't know about the poison. You have to believe me. I looked at him with a mixture of sadness and contempt. You may not have known the details. John may not have put the poison in the glass, may not have forged my signature on the insurance. But you knew something was going to happen. You knew Adriana had a plan to make me vulnerable. I turned to Detective Guzman. They can show the messages. The messages between the two of them discussing the plan. The detective nodded and picked up a tablet, opening a sequence of text message screenshots. She began reading aloud, from John to Adriana, 2 days before the party. Are you sure about this? It can't go wrong. Adriana's response. Trust me, it'll be quick. She'll be confused, vulnerable. Then we speed up the nursing home plan. John's response. Okay, but take it easy. It can't look like we're forcing it. The silence that followed was as heavy as lead. John was crying now, tears streaming down his face. I thought she was just going to give you some mild medication, something to make you dizzy, to prove you needed help. I didn't know it was poison. You have to believe me, Mom. But I slowly shook my head. Even if you didn't know about the poison, John, you conspired to drug me, to manipulate me, to force me into a situation of vulnerability that would allow me to sign documents and accept commitment. You knew, and you chose to participate. He opened his mouth to protest, but no sound came out. Because I was right, and he knew it. The real story being told there, before the police, my legal team, was about an ungrateful son who valued money more than his own mother's life. And there was no excuse, no justification, no words that could erase that. The detective continued, presenting evidence. She showed the false reports from Dr. Salazar, the bank records of the payments Adriana made to him, the attempts to use the fraudulent power of attorney. Each document, each record, each email was another layer of undeniable evidence. Andrew stood up and added, and to ensure everyone here understands the extent of this fraud, the document Mrs. Walker signed days ago, supposedly giving you power of attorney, was fake. It was prepared by me specifically to expose your intentions. Mrs. Walker's real assets are completely protected in irrevocable trusts that you could never, under any circumstances, access. You got nothing except additional evidence against yourselves. Adriana's face finally showed a reaction, disbelief, followed by cold, controlled anger. She'd been outsmarted, and she knew it. So you were faking this whole time. John's voice came out in a broken whisper, directed at me. The forgetfulness, the confusion, everything was an act. I stood up from the chair, walking until I was directly in front of him. Yes, everything. Because I needed to know how far you'd go. I needed concrete evidence, not just suspicions. And you gave me exactly that. Every visit, every pressure, every attempt to use that fake power of attorney was documented. You dug your own grave, brick by brick, lie by lie. John collapsed, his knees giving way. The officers held him so he wouldn't fall. Mom, please, I'm sorry, I was desperate. The restaurant, the debts, I didn't know what to do anymore. His voice was pathetic now, whining, but it no longer awakened any compassion in me, only pity. Pity for what he'd become. Desperate doesn't justify betrayal, John. Desperate doesn't justify attempted murder. If you needed help, you should have asked me. I'm your mother. I would have helped. But you chose another path. You chose to conspire with her. I pointed at Adriana to destroy me. And now, you're going to pay for that choice. Adriana finally spoke, her voice icy and controlled. You're not going to get away with this, Eleanor. We'll contest everything. We'll prove you manipulated us, that you set a trap. I gave a sad smile. You can try, Adriana. But it'll be hard to explain to a jury how the poison got into the champagne glass. It'll be hard to explain the payments to Dr. Salazar. It'll be hard to explain the fraudulent life insurance with my forged signature. You can call it a trap, but the truth is, I only documented the crimes you were already committing. Nothing you say will change that. Detective Guzman signaled to the other officers, who began leading John and Adriana out of the office. You'll be taken to the central station, where you'll be formally charged. You have the right to an attorney. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. The standard words, spoken thousands of times by police, but in that context, they sounded like a hammer of justice striking. John looked back one last time as he was being led away. Mom, ... double quotes. That's all he could say. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. When the door closed behind them, my legs finally gave way, and I sat heavily in the chair. Gwen placed her hand on my shoulder. You were incredible, Eleanor. So strong. But I didn't feel strong. I felt broken. Victorious, but broken. Because this emotional story, this total humiliation I turned against them, came with a price. And that price was losing my son. Andrew sat on the other side of the desk, his eyes kind. Eleanor, I know this was devastating. But you did the right thing. You protected yourself. And now, justice will take its course. I nodded, but couldn't speak. Gwen grabbed a bottle of water and offered it to me. I drank slowly, trying to process everything that had just happened. My son, that boy I'd rocked to sleep, whom I'd taught to read, whom I'd watched grow up, was being taken handcuffed to prison, and I was the one who set the wheels in motion. But I also knew that if I hadn't done that, I probably wouldn't be alive now. They would have succeeded. They would have committed me, assumed control of everything, and eventually found a way to guarantee that insurance payment. The elderly mother they underestimated would have been just another sad statistic. But not this time. This time, the victim became the hunter. And the real story would end with justice, not tragedy. The following days were a whirlwind of legal activities, police interviews, and media exposure I wasn't prepared to face. The story leaked quickly after all. It's not every day a retired professor unmasks a murder plot orchestrated by her own son and daughter-in-law. Local Charleston newspapers published dramatic headlines. Elderly mother escapes poisoning at retirement party. Son and daughter-in-law arrested for attempted murder and fraud. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters wanting interviews, curious neighbors, former university colleagues shocked. But I didn't talk to anyone. I just wanted silence, wanted to process what had happened away from the spotlight. Gwen kindly filtered all the calls, while Andrew handled the legal aspects. But even surrounded by support, I felt deeply alone. Because in the end, I'd lost my son, and no legal victory could fill that void. The first hearing happened a week after the arrest. I didn't want to go, but Andrew insisted my presence was important. Eleanor, the judge needs to see the victim, needs to put a human face on this whole process. So there I was, sitting in the hard courtroom chairs, watching John and Adriana being brought in handcuffed. John was unrecognizable. Sunken eyes, pale face, unshaven. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 1 week. Adriana, curiously, was more composed, with that same cold mask she always wore. When John's eyes met mine, he started crying silently. I looked away. I couldn't, not yet. The prosecutor presented the formal charges. Attempted murder, conspiracy to commit fraud, document forgery, elder coercion, and a list of other crimes that sounded surreal being read aloud. Bail was denied for both. High flight risk, they said, and danger to the victim. After the hearing, as I was leaving the courthouse, I heard a voice behind me. Grandma. I turned and saw Valerie, my 19-year-old granddaughter, with tears streaming down her face. She ran to me and hugged me tightly, sobbing on my shoulder. Grandma, I didn't know anything. I swear I didn't know. When I saw the news, I couldn't believe it. I held her tight, feeling my own heart break again. Valerie was innocent in all this. She was at college when everything happened, focused on her studies, with no idea of the storm her parents were creating. I know, dear, I know you didn't know. She pulled back, wiping tears with the back of her hand. How could they do this to you? How could my dad, ... Her voice failed. And in that moment, I realized Valerie had also lost something irreparable. The image she had of her own parents. The emotional story was her tragedy too. In the following weeks, more details came to light through the investigation. Gwen and the police completely dismantled John and Adriana's plan, revealing a conspiracy even more elaborate than I'd imagined. The payments to Dr. Salazar weren't just for false reports. He was also being prepared to testify, if necessary, about my supposed mental incapacity at a guardianship hearing. Adriana had researched extensively about oleander, including online searches for poisoning symptoms that seem natural, and how long oleander takes to kill. She'd bought the plants weeks before the party, cultivating them in her own garden, and the messages between her and John showed not just knowledge of the plan, but active participation. In one of them, John wrote, "If she signs the power of attorney soon, we don't need to go that far. That far, meaning killing her, meaning killing me." What hurt me most, however, was discovering the plan had existed for almost a year. John's debts started much earlier than he told me anything. Actually, he never told me. He simply hid it. And Adriana, that gold-digger daughter-in-law, had identified my assets as the perfect solution. Emails between her and an accountant showed she'd requested estimates of my house's value, my savings, everything. "If we can get access in 6 months, we can cover all debts and still have plenty left," she wrote. I was a financial asset to her, not a person, not a mother-in-law, just numbers on a spreadsheet that needed to be liquidated. And John, my ungrateful son, had agreed with that. Had looked at his own mother and seen only dollars. The total humiliation I felt reading those documents was indescribable. But it also solidified my resolve. They needed to pay for everything. It was during this period that John tried to contact me through his lawyer. He wanted to talk, wanted to explain himself. Initially I refused, but Andrew advised me, "Eleanor, it might be useful to hear what he has to say, and it might be important for you too, for some closure." So I accepted, but imposed strict conditions. It would be at the prison, with glass separating us, through phones, and with Andrew present. On the scheduled day, I sat in a hard chair on the outside of the thick glass, waiting. When John appeared on the other side, wearing the orange prison uniform, my heart tightened. He looked so small, so broken. He picked up the phone with trembling hands, and I did the same. "Mom," his voice came out choked. "Thank you for coming. I need you to know how sorry I am. I ruined everything. I know that." I looked at him in silence for a long moment before responding. "You did more than ruin things, John. You betrayed, you conspired to kill me. How do you expect me to process that? How do you expect me to forgive something like this?" He shook his head, tears falling freely now. "I don't expect forgiveness, Mom. I don't deserve it. But I need you to understand. I was desperate. The debts, creditors threatening to sue, the restaurant failing, and Adriana, she convinced me it was the only solution. That you were getting old anyway, that the money was just sitting there, that you didn't need so much, and I believed. God forgive me, I believed." His voice was full of self-pity, and that irritated me deeply. "So it's her fault? Is that what you're saying? That you're just a victim of Adriana's manipulations?" My voice came out harsher than I intended, but he needed to hear it. "No, that's not it. I made horrible choices. I knew what we were doing was wrong, but I continued anyway. I just wanted you to know I never wanted to really hurt you. Never wanted you to die. I thought Adriana was just going to give you something mild to make you confused for a while, so we could move forward with the nursing home and power of attorney. I didn't know about the poison, Mom. I swear I didn't know." He was begging now, desperate for some absolution I simply couldn't give. "But you knew something was going to happen to me at that party, John. Knew I'd be drugged, manipulated, made a fool of in front of everyone, and you stood there, watching, waiting. You hugged me that night knowing in minutes I'd be suffering. How do you live with that?" His silence was more eloquent than any words. He had no answer, because there was no answer that justified that. Then I said something that needed to be said. "John, I'm going to be honest with you. Part of me, a very small part, but still alive, still loves you as a mother. Because you're my son, and that doesn't change, no matter what you did. But the person I knew you as, the boy I raised, The man I thought you were. He died for me. You killed him when you decided my life was worth less than your debts. I saw something break inside him when the words left my mouth. His face contorted in pure agony. Mom, please, double quotes, but I shook my head. No, John, there's no please. You made choices. And now you're going to pay for them. I'm not going to ask for leniency from the judge. I'm not going to write character letters. I'm not going to do anything to reduce your sentence. You tried to take everything from me, my freedom, my money, my life, and you almost succeeded. But I'm stronger than you ever imagined. And that strength will sustain me while you serve your time. I stood up to leave, but before hanging up the phone, I added one last thing. And John, Adriana's lying to the police. She's saying it was all your idea. That you bought the poison, that you planned everything, and that she only went along because she was afraid of you. She's throwing you under the bus to try to reduce her own sentence. So while you're here crying and regretting, she's out there building a narrative where she's the victim and you're the monster. I saw shock and betrayal spread across his face, and for a second, just 1 second, I felt sorry, but it quickly passed. Because he'd done exactly the same thing to me. Had betrayed me in the worst possible way. And now he was tasting his own medicine. I hung up the phone, left the device on the hook, and walked out of that room without looking back. John Walker's real story was ending not with redemption, but with the inevitable consequence of his own actions. And me, I was just beginning to rebuild my life, a life free of him and all the poison he brought into it. The months that followed were a strange mix of relief and melancholy. The trial was scheduled, and the entire justice machinery moved slowly but inexorably. Andrew kept me informed of each development, Adriana's attempts to get a deal with the prosecution, offering to testify against John in exchange for a reduced sentence, the judge's denials to reduce bail, the psychological reports both were required to undergo. I followed everything from a distance, as if I were watching a movie about someone else's life. But at night, when the house got too quiet, reality hit me. I'd lost my son, not to death, which in some ways would be easier to process, but to greed, to betrayal, to horrible choices he made consciously. And that loss was a hole no legal victory could completely fill. Valerie became my anchor during this period. She came to visit me every week, sometimes staying the whole weekend. We cooked together, watched old movies, walked along Charleston's waterfront. She told me about college, about her future plans. And I saw in her everything John could have been if he'd made different choices. One afternoon, while we were having tea on the porch, she told me something that stuck with me. Grandma, I want you to know I'm not going to defend what my parents did. Never. What they tried to do to you is unforgivable. And I choose you. I'll always choose you. I held her hand, feeling tears burn my eyes. In that moment, I realized I hadn't lost everything. I'd lost an ungrateful son, but gained the certainty I'd raised a granddaughter with solid principles. And that, somehow, was a victory in itself. The trial finally began on a cloudy November day. The courtroom was packed, onlookers, journalists, some people from the university who came to support me. I sat in the bench reserved for victims, with Gwen on one side and Valerie on the other. When John and Adriana were brought in, I avoided looking directly at them. The prosecutor was a man named Marcus Chen, experienced and meticulous. He presented the case systematically, starting with the retirement party, going through the evidence of poison in the glass, medical reports, the fraudulent life insurance, payments to Dr. Salazar, incriminating messages. Each piece of evidence was placed like a domino, building a case so solid it was impossible to deny. The defense tried to argue Adriana acted alone, that John was manipulated. But the messages between them completely destroyed that narrative. They'd conspired together, and now, they'd fall together. The hardest moment was when they called me to testify. I walked to the stand with trembling legs, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Prosecutor Chen asked me direct, clear questions, and I answered each one looking directly at the jury. I told them about the party, about the strange taste of the champagne, about the sudden discomfort. I told them about the weeks of pressure to sign the power of attorney, about the insistent visits, about the nursing home suggestion. I told them about how I discovered the life insurance, the false reports, everything. My voice didn't tremble. I didn't cry. I'd cried enough in private. There, in that moment, I was the university professor I'd spent decades being clear, articulate, factual. When I finished, I saw some jury members discreetly wiping tears. The emotional story I told wasn't fiction. It was my life, and they understood the gravity of it. Adriana's defense tried to attack me during cross-examination. Her lawyer, a man in an expensive suit with an arrogant attitude, insinuated I'd set everything up, that I'd manipulated my son, that I'd created an elaborate trap. Mrs. Walker, isn't it true you purposely hid your mental capacity to make your son and daughter-in-law believe you were vulnerable? I looked at him calmly. I protected myself. When I realized I was being manipulated and my life was in danger, I took measures to defend myself and collect evidence. That's not creating a trap, that's survival. He tried to insist, but the judge interrupted him. Counselor, the victim had every right to protect herself. Move on to another line of questioning, or finish. The lawyer backed down, clearly frustrated. There was no way to make me look like the villain when the evidence against his clients was so overwhelming. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Witnesses were called. The bank manager John tried to deceive. The Oak Ridge manager who received Adriana's call, Dr. Salazar, who, under immunity, confessed to being paid to create false reports without ever examining me. My university colleagues who attested to my full mental capacity. Each testimony was another nail in the defense's coffin. But the most dramatic moment came when the toxicology expert took the stand and explained, in technical detail, how oleander works. It's a poison that in high doses causes cardiac arrest. In the United States, it's found in gardens, especially in the South. Mrs. Walker was lucky. She only took a small sip before switching glasses. If she'd drunk the full contents, she wouldn't be here today. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Even the journalists had stopped typing. The reality of what almost happened was crystal clear to everyone there. When it came time for the verdicts, the jury retired for only 6 hours. A short time, considering the case's complexity, but Andrew told me it was a good sign. When the jury comes back quickly, it's usually because the case is clear to them. There was no real doubt, and he was right. When the jury returned, the spokesperson read the verdicts in a firm voice. In the case of the state versus Adriana Lopez Walker, on the crime of attempted murder, we find the defendant guilty. On the crime of fraud, guilty. On the crime of document forgery, guilty. The list continued. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Adriana showed no emotion, but her hands gripped the table hard. Then came the verdict for John. In the case of the state versus John Walker, on the crime of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant guilty. On the crime of fraud, guilty, ... double quotes. He lowered his head, shoulders shaking. The real story ended with justice. After all, the sentencing came 2 weeks later. The judge, a severe woman around 60 named Margaret Holloway, looked directly at Adriana. Mrs. Lopez Walker, what you did was premeditated, calculated, and cruel. You tried to take the life of an elderly woman who never did you any harm, simply out of greed. For the crimes of attempted murder, fraud, forgery, and conspiracy, I sentence you to 15 years in prison without possibility of parole for the first 10. Adriana closed her eyes but remained impassive. Then the judge turned to John. Mr. Walker, what makes your case particularly repugnant is that the victim is your own mother. The woman who gave you life, who raised you, who sacrificed for you, and you repaid her by trying to rob her and conspiring in a plan that could have killed her. For the crimes of conspiracy, fraud, and elder coercion, I sentence you to 12 years in prison. John sobbed loudly. 12 years wasn't much compared to what he'd done, but for him, it would be an eternity. And me, I didn't feel joy, just a strange emptiness, as if something had ended but nothing had really been resolved. After it all ended, after John and Adriana were taken back to prison, after the courtroom emptied, I sat there for a long time. Andrew approached, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. Eleanor, it's over. You're safe now. And they're going to pay for what they did. I nodded but couldn't speak. Because yes, it was over legally. But emotionally, I knew it would take years to process all this. The total humiliation I almost suffered had been avoided, but the scars would remain. Valerie hugged me tight when we left the courthouse. Grandma, let's go home. I'll make dinner for you. And we're going to start thinking about the future, okay? Not the past. She was right. The trial had closed a chapter. But my life was just beginning a new one. A chapter without John, without Adriana, without all that poison. A chapter where I could finally breathe free. That night, sitting on the porch with Valerie, looking at Charleston's starry sky, I said something out loud that needed to be said. You know, Val, for a long time I felt guilty. I wondered if I'd failed as a mother. If I'd done something wrong in raising your father that led him to become ... that. But today I realized something important. I did my best. I gave love, gave education, gave values, and in the end, his choices were his, not mine. I can't carry the guilt for the horrible decisions he made. Valerie squeezed my hand. You didn't fail, Grandma. You were amazing. And you still are. Look at everything you survived. How you defended yourself. How you turned the tables. You're the strongest person I know. And maybe she was right. Maybe this emotional story of near destruction and eventual victory had taught me something. That strength isn't never falling. It's getting up, protecting yourself, and moving forward, no matter how deep the betrayal. And I was ready for that. Ready to start over. 6 months after the trial, my life had found a new rhythm. Different, but surprisingly good. I woke up early every morning, not out of obligation, but because I genuinely wanted to enjoy each day. I took walks along Charleston's waterfront, feeling the sea breeze on my face, watching the dolphins that sometimes appeared near the coast. The house, which for so long seemed too big and empty, was now a sanctuary of peace. I redecorated some rooms, getting rid of anything that reminded me of those dark days. The garden, which I'd neglected for months, flourished again under my care, but I pulled out every oleander plant I found and burned them. I didn't want that poison near me anymore, literally or metaphorically. The freedom I felt now was real, tangible. Something I could touch every morning when I opened the windows and let the sun in without fear. I started attending community classes at the local cultural center. Watercolor painting on Tuesdays, art history on Thursdays. I'd always been academic, but never had time to explore the artistic side. And I discovered it was liberating to create something with my own hands, without the pressure of grades or evaluations. I met wonderful people in these classes. Women and men my age who were also rediscovering life after retirements, losses, or other difficult transitions. One of them was Carmen Johnson, a 72-year-old Black woman who'd been through something similar to me. Her own daughter had tried to commit her to a nursing home to take control of her finances. Eleanor, she told me one afternoon while we painted together, we survived because we're strong, and now, we have to live. Not just exist, but truly live. Those words became my mantra. Carmen and I became close friends quickly. She had a sharp sense of humor and a life perspective that inspired me. We started meeting for weekly lunches, then for short trips. One weekend in Savannah, another in Asheville in the mountains. She taught me that aging doesn't mean slowing down or becoming invisible. It means having the wisdom to know what really matters and the courage to pursue it. You know what the problem is, Eleanor? She told me once while we were driving along the coast. People look at us, elderly women, and see fragility, see someone who needs to be cared for, protected, controlled. But the truth is we're dangerous, because we have nothing left to prove, nothing to lose, and decades of experience to guide us. And that scares people like that gold-digger daughter-in-law of yours. She was absolutely right. Andrew continued being not just my lawyer, but a genuine friend. He completely reorganized my estate, creating legal structures so shielded it would be impossible for anyone to attempt what John and Adriana attempted. Irrevocable trusts, specific powers of attorney, with clear limitations, revised will with multiple safeguards. Eleanor, your assets are now protected not just from criminals, but from any future manipulation attempts. And when you pass many, many years from now, I hope everything will go directly to Valerie, without going through anyone else. That brought me immense peace, knowing all my life's work, all the careful savings, would go to someone who truly deserved it, and not to an ungrateful son who saw money where he should have seen love. It was justice in its purest form. Valerie flourished. She enrolled in law school. Inspired, she told me, by the way I'd defended myself. Grandma, I want to help other people like you. Elderly people who are abused, manipulated, stolen from by their own families. I want to be their voice. Seeing my granddaughter transform family tragedy into life purpose was one of the greatest joys of this difficult period. She came to visit me always, bringing legal casebooks for us to discuss, asking my advice on ethics and justice. One Saturday afternoon, while we studied together on the porch, she looked at me with those sincere eyes and said, "Grandma, thank you for not giving up, for fighting. Because if you'd given up, I would have lost you. And you're the most important person in my life." I held her hand, feeling deep gratitude. The emotional story had a legacy. A young woman determined to make a difference in the world. I received letters from prison, from John, never from Adriana. The first ones I didn't even open, simply put them in a drawer. But after a few months, on a night when I felt particularly strong, I opened one. It was full of apologies, regrets, pleas for forgiveness. "Mom, every day here I think about what I did. And every day I hate myself a little more. You were right, I killed the son you raised, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive myself for it. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm just asking that you know I'm truly sorry." I read the entire letter, and when I finished, I didn't feel anger, didn't feel sadness. I felt nothing. And I realized that was actually liberating. He no longer had power over my emotions. I kept the letter and never responded. Maybe one day, in the distant future, I'll be able to talk to him again. But that day wasn't now. And maybe it never would be. I started participating in independent seniors groups, organizations that defend older people's rights and combat financial and emotional abuse. I shared my story, not the sordid details, but the essence, how I was almost a victim, how I defended myself, how I survived, and the responses were surprising. Dozens of people reached out to me afterward, sharing their own stories of family manipulation, of sons or daughters-in-law who tried to steal, of legal systems that don't always protect the vulnerable. I became a kind of accidental advocate, helping others find resources, connecting people with trustworthy lawyers like Andrew, sharing what I learned, and in that, I found a new purpose. The total humiliation I almost suffered transformed into a mission, ensuring others didn't go through the same without having the tools to defend themselves. One afternoon, while organizing old papers, I found photos of John as a child, that smiling boy, with bright, innocent eyes, who held my hand in every photo. For a moment, I let sadness envelop me, because that boy existed, he was real, and I loved him with every fiber of my being. But somewhere along the way, he got lost, took wrong paths, made horrible choices, transformed into someone I no longer recognized, and as painful as it was to admit, I needed to accept that the John I knew had died long before that trial. The man in prison was a stranger using my son's face. I put the photos in a box, at the back of the closet. I didn't throw them away. I wasn't ready for that yet, but I also didn't need to see them every day. It was what therapists call healthy mourning. And I was learning to do that mourning without losing myself in it. I planned trips, something I'd always wanted to do but always postponed. Europe in the spring, maybe. Carmen wanted to go with me, and Valerie said if she could get time off from school, she'd go too. The idea of exploring Paris, Rome, Barcelona, at 72, filled me with youthful excitement. "Eleanor," Carmen joked, "we're going to be those American old ladies Europeans love to hate, taking pictures of everything, talking loud in restaurants, wearing comfortable sneakers with tourist clothes. We laughed together, and I realized I hadn't laughed like that in a long time. Really laughed, from deep in my chest, without weight or guilt. It was pure freedom. And I realized something fundamental. My real victory wasn't defeating John and Adriana in court. It was recovering the ability to laugh, to plan futures, to dream. They tried to steal that from me, and they failed completely. On a summer night, sitting alone on the porch under a starry sky, I made a final reflection on everything that had happened. I thought about the retirement party, that sip of poisoned champagne, the months of fear and investigation, the trial, the sentencing. I thought about how it could have been different if I'd been less attentive, less suspicious, less willing to fight. I'd probably be dead, or locked in a nursing home, declared incapacitated, while they spent every penny I'd worked decades to accumulate. But no, I'd fought, I'd been smart, I'd used the only weapon they didn't expect me to have, my own intelligence, and I won. I didn't just survive, I thrived. Aging in the United States, I realized, doesn't mean being fragile, invisible, or disposable. It means being wise, experienced, resilient, and underestimating a woman with 7 decades of life, of battles won, of lessons learned. That, I discovered, is always a fatal mistake. Eleanor Walker's real story wasn't about being a victim. It was about being a survivor, warrior, victor, and that story was still being written, one day of freedom at a time. In the end, I realized my greatest victory wasn't seeing John and Adriana behind bars. It was recovering my freedom, my dignity, and my ability to dream again. It was looking in the mirror and recognizing the strong woman I'd always been, but almost let be destroyed by people who should have loved me. Today, at 72, I live each day as if it were a gift, because it is. I could be dead. I could be locked in a nursing home, medicated and forgotten. But I'm here, free, planning trips, helping other people defend themselves, and building memories with my granddaughter Valerie. The truth is, aging isn't synonymous with weakness. It's synonymous with wisdom, and whoever underestimates that, well, pays the price. And you? Have you been through something similar? Have you ever felt someone from your own family was manipulating or using you? What would you do if you were in my place? Share your story in the comments. I want to know if you've also had to fight for your own freedom, your dignity, or if you know someone who went through this. Sometimes, just by sharing, we help another person going through the same situation realize they're not alone. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss other emotional stories that bring life lessons and make us reflect on our own choices and relationships. Because in the end, we all need reminders that we're stronger than we think, and that we should never, ever underestimate the power of someone who truly knows how to fight for themselves. Until the next story.